Hi, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Ask Elly Intuitive Insights and Your Questions Answered. My name is Elly Molina, and I am your hostess. And if you're joining us for the first time on this podcast, here's a little about me. I'm an intuitive, a psychic, author, consultant, educator, and the creator of Kids Academy, a magical place where children and their adults learn to tap their inner magic while raising consciousness. To learn more about Kids, head on over to www.psykidsacademy.com and download your free 16-page guide titled What If? 6 Ways to Help Your Child Tap Their Inner Magic. And today, my guest is Daz Smith, known in the remote viewing circle as one of the best remote viewers of this era. And Daz, welcome to Ask Elly. You have such an amazing bio that I have to share with our listeners before we begin today's conversation. But if you'd like to say hello, well, say hello to our listeners today.
Yeah, hi there, and Happy New Year to you and your listeners. I hope it's going to be a good year for all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. I'm so excited to have you. And I'm very honored and pleased that you're here with us today on Ask Elly. Daz Smith, for those of you meeting Daz on this podcast for the first time, he's an artist, a graphic designer, and an author. He's an active remote viewer who continuously works with the top people in the field on both public and private remote viewing projects. He also runs several large information websites on the subject of remote viewing, and he edits and publishes 8 Martinis, a print online magazine dealing with the subject of remote viewing. Daz has also extensively researched the CIA Stargate archives and is very familiar with the 91,000 pages of information released on the government remote viewing programs. For the past 3 years, Daz has also been part of an experimental project called crypto viewing, whereby remote viewing is used to predict cryptocurrencies, markets, financials, news, and more for a base of subscribers. Daz, there's just like in this intro, and it goes on. So anybody who wants to read more about Daz, you can get onto his website, and I'll have links below in the podcast. But one of the things I just wanted to say, there's so many interesting pieces to your bio that we can start anywhere. So if those of us who are unfamiliar with the world of remote viewing, maybe Daz, you could share a little bit about what it is and how you got started. And then I want to tap into when I first saw I saw 8 Martinis before I even knew who you were. So it just brings me back. All right. Take it, Daz. Tell us a little bit about your world.
Absolutely, yes. Well, I'm luckier than most people that find anything psychic that they want to train in over their life. In that, I grew up in a household where my mother was invested and interested in all this, so it was normal for us to have a library of books on all kinds of subjects. Learning telepathy to clairvoyance, mediumship. The writings of Silver Birch. So we had a vast library. So from a very early age, that was essentially my reading material, and I still remember from the age of 10 years old that my favorite books that I used to read, even at school, were on mysteries like, paranormal mysteries, ghosts, and UFOs. And it started from there for me, really. At the age of around about 14, I took what I call classical psychic training. So that was in clairvoyance, mediumship, readings using things like tarot cards, sand, tea leaves, pretty much any, crystal balls, crystals, pretty much anything that was around at the time. And I liked that, and I did really well on it. And it was almost like I was scheduled to follow in my mother's footsteps of being a clairvoyant medium, because she was quite established in the local spiritualist church here in Bath, where I live. And it was almost like I was going to take that route. But that's not something I really wanted to do. And in 1992, when I was at a UFO conference, I happened to hear a taped audio conversation with someone who claimed to be a government insider, and he started talking about how the government in the US were using trained psychics to go anywhere in time and space and look for UFOs, and that intrigued me. And from that date onwards, I was hooked. Of course, it was 92, so it was pre-internet, really. So I had to essentially wait till around about 1995 when it all became public, and we started hearing about remote viewing through some email news groups, and then it took off for me from there. Really, in '97, I trained in it, and I've been doing it ever since. So I think I'm on nearly 25 years of practicing remote viewing now.
Yeah, you've got an incredible history. And it's really interesting. I didn't know that about you, that you were exposed to all of this world when you were 14. It's such history. Wow, this is really very, very cool. No wonder you're considered one of the best remote viewers over here in this era. That is such an honor. And I want to talk to you about perhaps, and I know that the listeners who listen to you all the time are so familiar with this work, but the people that are listening to my podcast, this is really new stuff for them. So if you can just share a little bit about the CIA Stargate, just a little bit, and even talk a little bit about Ingo Swan, which is going to be a very new name for people. That may be like a little bit of background history so that I can start and to ask the rest of the questions that I've got going on over here.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll first just go make a quick introduction into what remote viewing is. Remote viewing is essentially using your intuition or any other any other psychic skill that we all have or we can all develop. But what we do that makes it different than I call the classical techniques is that we agree as remote viewers to do our intuitive process wrapped up in a set of rules which we call protocols. And they are that, number one, that the project is never spontaneous. The project is always chosen, or there's always a target chosen before we do it as remote viewers. We always work blind, meaning that we don't know what the target is. It's always hidden behind a random number and given to us. And we also don't have anyone that knows the target in the vicinity of us when we're working the target as well, or in communication with us. We always record the data so that it can be looked at later and it can't be changed. And the most interesting and needed component part of the remote viewing process is we always should have targets that have an element of feedback, so that we can take the remote viewing data, we can then compare it to the feedback information, and you can give yourself an assessment of the accuracy. So I'm just a psychic or an intuitive like anyone else. Other than we wrap what we do within these rules, and literally over 25 years that I've worked every single project, I would only work it if it's wrapped up in these rules. I don't allow myself to go outside these rules in any way. So that's like a basic overview of remote viewing, and it essentially came about from around about 1972. The Americans heard rumors that the Russians were using trained psychics to spy on them,
Right.
spending huge amounts of resources and money on this. So the CIA decided to investigate this. So it went to the Stanford Research Institute, one of the leading think tanks in the US, still to this day, and said to some of the people there, Howard Puthoff and Russell Targ, can you look into this for us? Here's a $50,000 grant, which they did. And it started to show some very good successes, and it essentially snowballed from there and continued for over 20 years to 1995 when it was terminated. And during this process, it started right at the very beginning. A young man called Ingo Swan from New York, who was an artist and a creative himself, he started to get into psychic research himself in New York. And he heard about the SRI program, so he sent a letter to Howard Puthoff and said, I got these skills. How about testing me? Howe thought he'd give it a go, invited Ingo to SRI, and then Ingo just blew him away with his skills in remote viewing. And he essentially spent the next I'd say 23 years then working with Howard Puthoff to create a methodology which we now know today as controlled remote viewing,
Right.
which is essentially a broken down process of how Ingo Swan himself went through an intuitive process. And then he broke it down and then recreated it as CRV or controlled remote viewing. And they essentially transferred that to the American military and the American military used that technique to spy on the Russians and all kinds of activities. So
Right,
that's a quick overview. Really,
right, right, right,
there's a lot more in depth. There's a lot more people involved. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA, Department of Defense, everyone.
right.
Everyone at one point or another used various remote viewers in the 23 year plus history to look at things that they couldn't get information on by any other means.
Wow, I know, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. Um, the first time, so I've been doing psychic work, just to talk about myself for a minute. I've been doing psychic work all my life, but
Yeah.
without the formal training that a lot of other people have had. So when I came across the International Remote Viewing Association back in 2015, that's when I found them. It was like, oh
Right.
my God, I found people who look at the psychic world seriously and not as Madame Cleo, okay, and like
Yes.
who scratched my car yesterday? Who cares, you know? There are bigger things in the world and more important. So I was so drawn to IRVA that I attended a conference in New Orleans that year, and Daz, I was such a newbie. I sat next to Russell Targ, and I had no idea who Russell Targ was. And
Right.
here
Yeah.
we were sitting next to each other, chatting and doing all of this, what people do when they sit together in conferences. And then all of a sudden, Lance Mungia comes on and starts talking about third eye spies. And here's Russ. I had zero clue.
Yeah.
So it was just really fascinating. And I don't know well, for people listening, they may want to just check on Third Eye Spies. So they'll get a background. It's a
Yeah.
movie and a documentary, so they can get some background, a little bit more on the Stargate project and the history of remote viewing. And then that also brings me to Men Who Stare at Goats, right? Because
Yes.
right? Lots of those men who stared at, maybe not George Clooney, but
Yeah.
lots of those men who stared at goats, right?
I do,
So,
yes. The film is a bit too comedic for my liking because it sheds a comedic look at the topic and the subject. But to be honest, there have been some crazy moments in the history of remote viewing and psychic development as it was used by the military. They did do some experiments where they did try to stop the hearts of goats and stuff like that. Yeah, during the process.
wow, I know, I know. I know that Uri Geller was also involved a little bit in, wasn't he involved in Stargate also in that
He
project?
was he wasn't as involved in Stargate, but he was tested in 1972, 1973 at Stanford Research Institute at the very beginning. They gave him classical psychic test to do and remote viewing test, and the videos right there of all those experiments. They're on my YouTube channel and everything. So, and he did very well at them at the time, although that they couldn't absolutely 100% confirm that there was no trickery involved because it wasn't ironclad experiments. Yori tended to have he had a way about him where he would, he was quite a showman, so you couldn't sit him down and make him stay there. You would get up, he would walk around, he would leave the room, come back. So it wasn't ironclad, but they were pretty sure that he showed a really good intuitive effect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He has like today they would probably call him ADHD or something. So
Something like that. Yes, yes.
yeah. So I have a couple of questions for you. Before I forget, because I have a 10, what happened? Anyway, one of the things I'd like to, can you please tell people where they can go on YouTube so that they can find your channel and they can watch the videos and really get some history and participate in remote viewing?
Yeah, yeah. On YouTube, they just have to type in the word, all one word, remote viewed, and then that will come up on my channel there. And
Yep.
it does have the Lance Mangia film on there, Third Eye Spies, and it also has a 2 hour interview I did with Lance recently about making that documentary as well. But it also has the chat we had with you, which was fantastic, and the other people we get along usually on a Friday night for just a general open discussion on all things remote viewing. There are also loads of techniques on how to learn remote viewing on that channel as well. And I also have lots of my examples on there where you can actually see me live in front of a video camera doing doing remote viewing on a whiteboard usually.
Wow. Wow. And you teach remote viewing also. So,
I do, but I only teach 1 to 2 people a year.
okay. All right. Okay. So it's pretty, but you have, don't you have an online course also for people if they were interested?
No,
No.
what I did do is midway through last year, to help people that are new to remote viewing, I devised a 2 sheet paper template system where they could literally just do it straight off of watching a 5 minute video of me showing how to fill in the template and then going off with the sheet of paper and then doing it themselves.
Yeah, I've seen that video, FYI. Okay. So
Okay,
that
yeah.
is very effective. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, awesome. All right, let's talk a little bit about Ingo. I've got some questions that people have sent in. I'm curious about Ingo for our listeners. And I'm also curious, this is a personal thing. I'm very curious about your 9/11 project. Okay. So I
Okay,
do
yeah.
own a copy of that book, but I have a personal interest in that. So I'm going to circle back after we talk about Ingo a little bit and I ask you these
Okay.
questions. All right.
Yep.
All right. Tell us a little bit about Ingo Swan, because most of my listeners have never heard this name before.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, Ingo is he is an amazing person. He's passed now. He passed a couple of years ago, and he's essentially what we call the father of remote viewing. He was invited to SRI in 1972 to participate, and he pretty much stayed there till 1986 when he left. And he devised what we use today is called controlled remote viewing, which is a set of methods, very strict methods based on, just writing your observations down on sheets of paper with a pen of how to record your intuition. But it's essentially that set of methods he produced in 1986 has become what we call the genesis of remote viewing, and there are many other methods out there that their root core comes from those techniques that Ingo created. And he was just an amazing, gifted, creative, intuitive person that had the insight where no one else has gone in the past. He wouldn't take no for an answer, so he would be involved in scientific experiments, and he didn't let the scientists take control. He let them do their experiment, but he also chipped in with ways he could make the experiment better, and how he could get better information by assessing his own intuitive process. He was very good at breaking down his intuitive process to find out what was the signal and what was the noise. And that's essentially the crux of all his work was, over the years I known him in remote viewing, is determining what's the signal coming through and what is the noise, separating the noise out, so then you get, you amplify the signal essentially.
Yeah.
And he was just amazing. He spent a huge career in remote viewing and psychic research. On his CV, he tells me he did over 1 million experiments for scientists over that period of time.
That's insane.
It is
Wow.
insane, yeah. And I because I got access to his records now, all his papers and records have gone to the University of West Georgia. And
Right.
for 2 years, I've been looking at those and exploring those. And it's amazing to see because, you'll see that he'll go away. For example, he spent 4 years trying to remote view letters and numbers because for remote viewers, what we do as a process, we try to use our senses, taste, touch, smell, sight, to describe targets. So, we would describe a car or something like hard, metallic, feels like it's moving, feels like it was designed. It has 4 black rubber smelling parts to it. What we do with remote viewing is we try to describe, we never try to identify, because when you identify, your imagination kicks in because it wants to please you. And yeah, so Ingo was really good at doing all that kind of stuff, and he developed this really amazing techniques for us to do this. And as part of this 4-year study he did on trying to get words and numbers, which are hard for us because it's hard to describe a number, you see. If I told you to describe the number 5 with your normal senses, it has no color, it has no texture, it has no taste, it has no smell. So it's very hard to describe other than trying to describe, general shapes. So he spent 4 years just literally on one project alone trying to describe letters and numbers. And he did tens of thousands of experiments on that. And I've seen the experiments. He was like a machine, unlike most of us that give up after a few, he was like a machine. He would, if he had a project in mind, he would be there until the end.
Wow. That is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing work.
Just even thinking about how to describe a letter or even a number without, with, right, it's just a visual that we have, that we've learned, that we've associated. Again, now we're
Absolutely.
going into this analytical overlay, the AOLs, right? Like,
Yes.
that's it, you know?
Yeah.
And you met Ingo, so
I did, yes. I mean, Ingo, in the mid '90s to the late '90s, on the internet news boards or email news groups where people were discussing remote viewing because it was a new subject then, it got to be quite heated at times. And we have to be honest in that I would say half the scientists and practitioners out there don't believe that remote viewing could be trainable or that the trainable methods work. So there's always been this debate over, did Ingo's method work? Does it work well? Has it been evaluated properly? And because I read all the documents in the Stargate archives, and I'm well versed in the history of remote viewing, I defended Ingo quite a lot in these remote viewing groups, and it got back to him that I was defending him, and then he started a dialogue with me, which was in itself strange because Ingo would never use new technology like computers and the internet. So the dialogue would go like, he would see what or if we had a two-way dialogue, I would have to email my letter to a friend of his. A friend of his then would print it out and fax it to Ingo. Ingo would then read it, type up a letter, fax it back to the guy, who would then scan it in and send it back to me by email. So it
that
was
is
a long,
wild. Yeah.
it is it's a long, wild, complicated process. But that's how we got to know each other, because I started defending him and his research. It led to him inviting me to spend time with him in New York, and I went there. I was meant to stay for a week, but I ended up only staying for a day because I knew he was quite ill at the time, and I didn't want to burden him. So I literally only spent 8 or 9 hours with him in his apartment in New York. But being invited there was an honor in itself, because not many people had
Right.
that
Right.
chance. Yeah.
That is an honor in of itself. Absolutely. Wow. Wow. I've got so many questions coming into my own right, coming up right now for me, that I can want to go off on tangents, but I do want to ask two questions that were submitted to me. And because that's part of Ask Elly, Intuitive Insights, ask questions. So my first question is for you, and it was submitted by a gentleman from England. And the question is, Daz, what are the limitations of the remote viewing tool, if there are any?
Okay, so far, I don't think there are any limitations whatsoever. But there are caveats to that, in that, as discussed just now, we know that numbers and letters are harder. I don't like, some people have said impossible. I don't believe that's true, because there have been odd occasions where I myself have got perfect words and numbers and letters, and I've seen other people do it as well. I just think they're harder because they're what we call non-tangible. They don't exist in reality. They're not physical. So I think numbers and words are hard. I think looking at events in the future are harder, less accurate, and the stats from myself and everyone else into remote viewing shows that looking at future events are less accurate than looking at past events, by a small degree, but they are less accurate. But again, I think lots of things come into play at that. Other than those two, though, I don't think anything can stop or hinder our RV. Remote viewing can go anywhere, anytime in time and space. As long as and you're prepared that if you're looking into the future, you have to be prepared that your data on that is probably 10, 20, 30% less accurate than it would be if you're looking at normal stuff. Not always, but you have to keep that in mind.
Right. And thank you for that. And that brings to mind again that people who are not as skilled as, say, you and Lynn and you, Tom, and we can mention Lori, many names, right? Ray, go on and on and on. But for people who are not as skilled, I really think, oh, and Paul, of course, I really think that one of the biggest problems in remote viewing for the remote viewer is the associative component. I mean, maybe I'm just talking myself, but one of my biggest drawbacks is that I just see something and I'll describe it. And then, that associative overlay kicks in,
Yeah.
and then I'm a little doomed. All right. So, sometimes I can hit it. All right. Which is it luck, or I don't really understand
Yeah.
the process of it. But I think that is the biggest hindrance in remote viewing for people, not even experienced remote viewers, right? Like, what do you do with that when it kicks in?
Absolutely. The noise, because we all have a lot of noise in our day-to-day lives and, in the universe in general, does interfere in the process. But that's where I think Ingo's initial vision of controlled remote viewing is it's pretty amazing. And I've studied all them, and I'm quite lucky, as I said, because I'm come from the viewpoint of I tried everything before remote viewing, and I was quite good at what I tried. Other than everything I tried beforehand was very chaotic and archaic. Most of it was spontaneous. But if I was doing channeling, or if I was doing a reading for a person, you don't know, for number one, you don't know if the reading is coming off the body language or anything like that. But it was all very spontaneous, whereas the methodology that Ingo created, and where everything stems from there into all the other flavors of remote viewing, is very controlled, and it puts you as an intuitive in total control of the process. And it also gives you a very good system to understand when that noise is coming in, that analytical overlay, and you can move that to one side to separate it. So I do believe that it's the process that helps, and the fact that I've used that particular process for 24 going on 25 years now. It's not taught me anything external. All it teaches you eventually over that period of time is how to read your own internal subtle impressions.
Mm,
I've learned nothing about the universe with this, and it's nothing external. The CRV and other methodologies over a period of time teach you about yourself, and how when you get these little tingly sensations come in, your spider sense, the very small little nuances of those may indicate certain things to you. And again, that comes with just practice and getting it right and wrong over a period of time.
yeah. Thank you for that. I just want to share this because we're talking about signal, we're talking about noise. A couple of weeks ago, I don't have the dates exactly. One of my friends, it was one of those evenings, right, where one of my friends from Oregon said, "Hey, let's go do some remote viewing. Okay, I'm going to give you a target." And so she gave me this number, boom, 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 right? And I started to, remote view, and I saw dead bodies. I saw gray. I mean, I saw, again, is it noise? I saw dead bodies, all right. I saw people lying down, okay, figures lying down. Of course, my associative was to put it into, okay, these are bodies. I don't know what
Yeah.
they are. These are things lying down. Okay, they're on top of each other. There was a lot of debris on top of it. There was gray. It was devastation and destruction. So my noise went to, this is a photo of the Holocaust, okay? Or
Yeah.
something to that extent. That's what it felt like. It felt like really big destruction. And then she said, she said, no, the target is blah, blah, blah. It's going to be the news tomorrow on USA News. And I was like, I don't even watch the news, okay? Like, anyway, needless to say, the headlines on the following day were the tornado in Kansas with all of the destruction. And I was like, oh, wow. Now I saw that. I didn't know that I saw that. Okay. Because I didn't go into like, where is this? I didn't go into that. Where am I seeing all of this? And I'm going to tell you, Daz, even if I had asked myself that question, knowing me the way I know myself, I wouldn't have been able to say, oh yeah, Kansas. I know that there's like somebody in our Friday night discussion groups who's able to like take that map and pinpoint places like that. Only, that's not my, not happening for me as of yet.
Yeah.
So when I did get that, of course, it was like, wow, now what do you do with that information? What does one do? I mean, right? We see something happening. We don't know what it is. Who are we going to tell? How, who's going to believe anybody anyway? Like with Jimmy, for example, right? In the remote viewing group, who was able to see things, but nobody is going to believe these things. So, what do we do with that kind of stuff if that's even a question to be answering, but
Yeah,
I'm sure you get this also when you remote view.
absolutely. But what we've done over the past, myself and a team of people I work with over the past nearly going on 4 years now, is we take that experience that you just went through, but we use it in a controlled manner, in that we do that to look at markets like cryptocurrencies, gold and silver, and we also do the news events as well for our patrons. So we have around about 30,000 subscribers at the moment on crypto viewing. And
Mm-hmm.
we do the cryptocurrencies. We do the other markets like silver and gold occasionally, the Dow Jones, S&P 500. But every month, without doubt, we always all four of us as remote viewers look forward to the next month, and we do probably between 5 and 10 predictions each of the top news stories for the following month, just so that our subscribers can have a look at that and they can get a little bit of insight on some of the things that will probably happen. And I can't verify what the others are doing, but I know myself that on doing the future predictions for that on the news, I'm running it around about 65% accuracy. So if I give you 10 predictions each month, 6.5 of them will be true, and
Wow.
three and a half won't.
Yeah, that is wild. Speaking of cryptocurrencies, um, I want to bring that to, I have a number of people that I work with that are now branching. I don't work with them in crypto. That's not my thing. But I have a number of people that I've been working with historically in the psychic realm and all of this who are now branching off into the world of cryptocurrencies. And I know that they are going to find this segment extremely fascinating. Can you share with us, if somebody were interested? I've got a few people listening who are very involved in crypto.
Yep.
Where can they start? What can they do? How can they start to access this world?
It's quite complicated because cryptos are very volatile. They can go up. Well, I mean, Bitcoin, the main one, can go up or down 20% in a single day. But essentially, if you want to use intuition towards it, again, if you're using in the RV world, the remote viewing world, it has to be blind. So, for example, in crypto viewing, we get given tasks, cryptocurrency targets, and we don't know what they are, so we just get the random number. And each of us, there's four of us as full-time remote viewers within the team. We go off and do our own thing on it. And essentially what I do is I initially do my ideograms, just get a general flow of the crypto, the feeling of it. And then I do all these set tasks just so that I can identify, once I get feedback, if I'm on target. So I will try to draw the logo for the crypto. I will then try to describe the top person, CEO or the primary person, and the team below them. I would then try to chart how I think the crypto is going to do over the next month, 6 months, and a year. So I just, do that almost like automatic writing. And then
Mm-hmm.
try to sketch or describe the technology behind the crypto, or technology or the product.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got all this information and I'm given the feedback file after we've all done it all, I can check. And, I generally go by if my logo is a good match or getting close to the match of the logo, and my CEO and my technology feels right. If those points are right, then I give a lot more credence to my chart information on if I think, and my feelings if I think it's going to be a good crypto or a bad crypto. And that's essentially how I do it. And I guess that would be probably a good approach for other people as well. To give yourself 3 or 4 points that you could check afterwards to verify if you're on target. And if those are right, like the logo and the person involved, or even the name of it or something like that, then if you do a prediction chart as well, or an idea of where it's going to go up or down, if the rest of it's right, then there's no reason why your chart thing should be off, really. You should give it more credence.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like good advice. If people listening wanted to be involved in your crypto viewing work, do they have access to you somehow, some way?
We have I mean, if they want to subscribe or anything, we have a channel on Patreon, and it's patreon.com/crypto viewing. And as I said, we have 30,000 subscribers on that now,
Oh,
and it's like a tiered thing. The more you subscribe, the more information you get. We put out reports, content, and it's generally lots of videos. It's lots of video work because people don't like to read things nowadays. They
Yeah.
don't want to read a couple hundred pages of information. So we try to do it in these engrossing. I call it infotainment. So it's information and it's entertainment at the same
Nice.
time. And
Nice.
we don't just do cryptos and stuff as well. Once a month, they also, as a team, chuck in the occasional mysteries target, and we've looked at all kinds of things. Like one of our most recent ones was the pyramids, and that's out this month.
Okay,
And
cool.
yeah, the construction of the pyramids, who constructed it, where it came from, all that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
those are chucked in as well to keep us fresh as remote viewers. Otherwise, it gets a bit boring looking at markets all the time.
Right,
And
right,
to
right.
and the patrons and subscribers love that kind of stuff. They want that kind of stuff in
Mhm.
amongst their information as well. They want a bit of a light relief.
Right. Okay, awesome. So if anybody does come afterwards and ask me, I'm going to direct them to you. And
Absolutely, yeah.
all right, sounds good.
And
Um,
I have to be honest, we are helping people make. We're not financial advisors, and we always say you
right.
should use our information with everyone else's information. But I myself, I don't have a huge amounts of personal wealth or money, that I could lose. But the money I have invested over the last 2 years in my own intuitive process, it's slightly down today. It's down 20% today, but on a general day, I'm up. My investment's up 600% in 2 years. And where can you get? You cannot get that anywhere else.
Yes. Good for you. Good for you. I know I have some people listening to this today who are probably going to reach out because they're working this intuitively and they've been doing very well since they started. But
Okay.
there's always, there's room for more, and there's always so much learning that needs to happen. So
Yep.
it's a great place to start. Awesome, awesome. Okay, I have a couple more questions if we have some more time. We have a few more
Yeah. Go for it.
minutes. And
Yeah.
so I got this one kind of jumping around, but this goes back to Ingo. And Ingo Swan is called the father of remote viewing. I guess I needed to I needed to ask this earlier. Does it mean that before him remote viewing did not exist? Yeah.
Most not in the format we. I mean, anything psychic is the same. If you're doing clairvoyance or readings, mediumship, or anything, or even just spontaneous stuff, it is essentially the same as remote viewing, other than what we do is wrapped within these scientific rules. So as remote viewers, we're saying, okay, what I do from now on is going to be within these scientific protocols, so that it can be evaluated properly, and that the only form of communication that I have got and I've recorded here, it can only be intuition. It can't be noise or contamination in other means, because I've eliminated all those from part of the process. So it's just that, really. But Ingo did essentially come up with the words remote viewing, in 1972 during an experiment, and he did come up with the protocols, and he developed the methodology that most of us are following in one format or another. So yeah, I'm pretty a sticker on saying remote viewing really didn't exist in the modern format we have it now before 1972.
Yeah. All right. I hope that answers his question and other people's questions also. All right. If you have a few more moments, is there anything that you particularly want to share before I hit you with what I'm looking for?
Uh, Other than to tell people just do it, everyone's got an innate natural ability for intuition. It doesn't mean we're all going to be, world class remote viewers, but you might have enough ability that you can train over time to increase. Also, to just get you through day to day, life, like finding parking spaces, lost items, and like we discussed, you've got people that are interested in cryptos and markets. You could quite easily set up small little things, with the minimum amount of training and experience to get yourselves and follow your gut feelings. Because we know that from doing interviews with the top CEOs of S&P 500 companies, that they've got where they are today generally by following their gut instinct, which is it's just the same thing. It's just that where we're expanding ours. I'm no different than anyone else out there. I'm a normal person. All I've done for 24 years is teach myself to listen to these really subtle internal things inside of me, and
Mhm.
I know myself in that regard very intimately. So I know when this data comes in, if it's good or bad or whatever, and we all have the ability to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, just go out and do it.
Yeah.
It can
And
change
that's
your
such,
life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm so adamant about working with kids. This is
Yeah,
because kids have this, it's there, and then the adults go and take it away and squash it and negate it. And then they have to unlearn it, or some of them never unlearn it. And so, one of the things that I'm really passionate about with kids is teaching the adults to let your kids share what they're really getting and just believe them.
yeah,
Just believe them. So
absolutely.
that's
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the genius of the CRV process and all the other flavors that have come from it, from Ingo Swan, is that we're essentially doing that as adults to ourselves. We're teaching ourselves to unlearn all those bad habits that have been enforced upon us. And the most amazing thing for me is that the process is very creative. It's very art based with doodles and sketches and stuff.
yeah,
Uh, and it's almost like over a period of years of doing one of these remote viewing methods of going back to my more primitive side of sketching and drawing and doodling as a child. So everything I do is like ideograms in remote viewing. Is just like really basic, like stick figures of people, stick figures of houses, and it's almost like regressing back to when we were a child with that amazing natural creativity that it's been sucked out of us as we grow older.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. I have one last question. This is a personal question. Tell me about, even though I have the book, but I want people to hear it. Tell me a little bit about your remote viewing for 9/11 and Farsight. Was it Farsight it was Farsight, right? It was a
Yeah,
while.
it was a Courtney Brown Farsight project. I can't remember what a year we did it. It was quite a few years ago now, probably about 8 years to 10 years ago. Again, like all the projects I did for Courtney back then, he would literally just send us an email saying, "Okay, we're ready now to begin target whatever," and it might have been something like Target 6. So that's all I had for it was Target 6, and it could have been anything in the world. And I think
Right,
myself and Dick Algar both worked that target, and we worked it for several months. I think my one on that was probably about 4 or 5 months, continuously doing RV sessions on paper, and I would do it and send it to Courtney, and he would say, "Yeah, that's okay. Do a bit more." Or on page 5, you wrote or you drew this. Go back in and get more information. So that goes on for a period of months. And then you get to a stage where he goes, "Okay, you've done enough now. Now do the entire thing you've just done on a whiteboard and video it for people." So we did that,
mhm,
and yeah, we were both blind, and both myself and Dick Algar described the events of 911 because there were several targets that Courtney had us do for that. I think one was to look at the 911 event in New York. One was to look at the Pentagon event as well.
right, right.
Um, and on both those, I think we both come up with some amazing data. I have to be honest though, I can't confirm whether the data comes from the actual target events themselves or maybe from mythology that is built up since about those events, or even from the mind of Courtney Brown himself, the tasker. It was
Right.
his intent driving what we got. But for me, the most amazing data, and confirmed by, I have to be honest, thousands of witness testimonies from architects and the police and the firemen and pilots and everything, is for me is the Building 7 and the way that came down. For me, that's the smoking gun of everything. And my data and Dick's data clearly seems to indicate that there was a shadowy agency involved, a third party. Yeah, and they had demolition. They put charges of demolition and stuff, and brought that building down. And if that's true alone, and and that shows that there was a conspiracy, then I think it means we need to look at the rest of what happened on those days as well. Because yeah, if one part's a conspiracy, then other parts most probably are as well.
Yeah, so this is very interesting to me. My body's going into chills. I have been writing a book for many, many years. It's a young adult, it's going to be a young adult novel. The part of the opening scenes, it starts with Building 7. That is why, actually, that's a part of it, even how I started to find you as I was doing my research with remote viewing and 9/11. Guess who popped up? Even though somebody had given me eight, actually, it was Gail from Seattle who had given me 8 martinis many, many years ago. All right. And I'm reading through it. This is fascinating. But I hadn't made an association with you personally. And then when I was doing my 9/11 research, okay, with remote viewing, 9/11, guess you popped up. Okay, I got the book. And then one thing led to another. And then here we are now talking about this. So I'm going to follow up with you later somewhere else, okay, and get some more information about that.
Absolutely,
I'm
yeah.
gonna suck your brain, okay, for my book.
Because and you know, it's a controversial subject even to this day. But you know, I think since we did that project, I think attitudes are changing. People are a bit more aware now of, you know, you can't fully trust your governments and agencies. And there's a lot more evidence coming out now. I recently just watched a documentary, I think last week, from some of the people that their relatives were killed in the buildings, you know, the towers themselves. They're calling for more of a public disclosure of what went on. And there's so many architects, you know, I think there's like tens of thousands of architects and tens of thousands of pilots that have signed petitions saying, you know, the way that it's been described these events happened couldn't have happened that way. It's impossible. And, you know, we're experts in our field, and building, you know, steel frame buildings do not collapse with small fires, that kind of information. So I think the landscape of the event is changing, and I think the RV data we got all those years ago could possibly be a bit better reviewed and discussed now, because in the past when we did it, it was almost too controversial. Even the people within remote viewing don't like to talk about the remote viewing we did on it back then.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. This is fascinating. And is there anything, we're coming to the end of my podcasts are usually only half an hour, but for 2022, I'm making them a little bit longer. So is there anything else that you personally would like to share that people, you know, need to know, that you feel they need to know?
Nothing that comes to mind other than, you know, try it for yourself. Don't take mine and yours and everyone else's word for it. Remote viewing is so easy. You could literally try it for yourself in a matter of minutes, and that's the only way, you know, to really get a sense of what can be achieved and how you can use it in day-to-day life. And you know, there are people like me. You know, I'm for the last 3 years now, I've been this is essentially my full-time job. As I said, I'm not rich, but I am making an income off it, and I am increasing my personal investments using intuition. It's not to a stage where, you know, I'm a millionaire overnight or anything, but you know, we also have to factor into it our life goals and our destiny as well. You know, that's maybe not the destiny for all of us, but yeah, you can use it in everyday life to do the most simplest things. Just try it out. That's all I can say to people, really.
Yeah. And thank you so much. And I just love, what I personally love is how the conversation, it is shifting now in the collective consciousness, and that people are now beginning to talk more about our intuition, our abilities, our psychicness, you know, let's use the word remote viewing, but basically our seeing without eyes and our intuitive knowledge, and that there's such a large conversation, not large enough yet, but a large conversation happening in this realm. So we're going to be getting new vocabulary coming. It's exciting. These are exciting times that we're in, especially in this realm of, you know, let's call it quantum leaping and quantum thinking. And,
Absolutely, yeah.
you know, we're going to be developing new vocabulary here as we go along.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see where things are going, and you know, even including like the UAP, the UFO disclosures over the last couple of years as well, because we now know that consciousness plays a very active part in how you see UFOs and how they allegedly communicate, how they drive the UFOs and everything. So yeah, I think we're going to see it a lot more over the coming decade.
Wow, this is going to be exciting. Thank you for being here today with us, and it has been a pleasure. And if anybody listening now wants to find out more about Daz, please go online, check Daz, D-A-Z, Smith, S-M-I-T-H. I will have some links in Podbean, and follow up with him and go listen to his YouTube videos. and learn, learn, learn. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for being here today. See you all next week.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks, Daz, for being here.
Yeah, it's